Today is Friday, June 2nd. We're going to go around the bases with our MLB insider at the New York Post, Jon Heyman. Jon, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing well. And, we're going to ask you 4 topics here, and let's start with our first topic here. And we're going to talk about the Oakland A's. It has not been a good season for them. It's one of the all-time bad starts. You wrote about them this week and how they could be looking at that all-time worst record in MLB history. What more can you say about that?
I mean, we've seen this before. There have been threats to that Mets record of 40 and 120 in 1962. Of course, that is recalled mostly as a fun team, but certainly as the losingest team in modern baseball history. We thought the 2003 Tigers were going to do it, and they ended up winning 5 of their last 6 games to rally and get to 43 wins. I don't think the Oakland A's are going to make it. They're on pace now not to win the 40 games, to go lower than 40. They are not a good team. This is the Moneyball team where they have taken low payrolls and been able to win despite those low payrolls. They've won 90 games several times through basically figuring things out, through analytics, through smarts, and it's kind of caught up to them. They've got the lowest payroll, and they have easily the worst team. I did talk to Ed Kranepool from the 62 Mets, who was a terrific gentleman. Now down in Boca, used to live in Long Island, but a New Yorker through and through from the Bronx. And, he said, I don't think anyone in the 62 team gives a damn whether they do it or not. So he's not actually keeping tabs on it, but reading between the lines, this guy is not a loser, does not want to be associated with losing. I think he'd be happy to see that Mets record go. He'd much rather be associated certainly with that 69 team. He's the only player who was on the 62 team and the 69 team. And of course, I asked him about being on the 62 team because I looked it up. He was pretty young, 17 years old, 2 days out of Monroe High School in the Bronx. He's out in LA, and the first game, he was a Met. Sandy Koufax throws a no-hitter. So he probably knew he was in for a long season, didn't know quite how long, but I think the A's season is going to be even longer.
Yeah, just to follow up here about the Oakland A's, Jon, they're currently coming into this Friday, 12-46, a minus 195 run differential. Now, when you think about this team, they've always been sellers at the deadline, obviously selling off their higher priced pieces to contending teams. When you look at the way this team is currently constructed and how poorly they're playing, real quick, could they even be possibly selling assets at the deadline? Is there anything valuable worth on this team right now?
I think you'd have to look long and hard. They've got obviously a very, very young team. They did sign a couple of veterans, but they were basically journeyman type players. They're not really that valuable pieces. They might make small pieces at the deadline, but they're certainly not getting any headlines. They're not making any headway. It's not going to help turn their team around. Frankly, they have not made great trades in the last couple of years to begin with. So they're really in a rough spot. I mean, I do believe that they do have smart people in that front office. They obviously have a great track record. They're currently in a major slump, and I think it's going to help the Mets lose that record finally.
Yeah, and I think the most interesting thing about this season is the most talked about topic about the A's isn't even their record right now. It seems like it's more about that move to Las Vegas potentially, and that's what most people are focusing on when it comes to that team. Jon, let's move on to our next topic here, and let's talk about the Milwaukee Brewers. Obviously, they made a huge deal when they traded Josh Hader to the San Diego Padres, and a lot of people had some backlash on how that deal came together, because the Brewers are always seem to be in contention in the NL Central. When you look at this team in the current state way the NL Central looks right now, could the Brewers be looking to make more trades at the deadline? Could they be sellers again?
You know what? I've been told they are not going to be selling. They obviously have had a ton of injuries, and they've done a great job overcoming those injuries. Obviously not the strongest of divisions, but right now as we do this, they are in first place in that Central Division. So give them credit. They've done a great job. I mean, last year, they obviously tried to thread the needle. They actually did get pieces that do help them for the future. Payamps is a very good relief pitcher. Gasser in the minor leagues is a prospect, and they ended up getting, by making another trade with Esteury Ruiz, who they got for Hader, they ended up getting William Contreras, who's their starting catcher and a very good hitting catcher. So in the long term, it's not going to look as terrible as it looked last year when they made that deal. Obviously, they lost several games in a row to Pittsburgh, ended up missing the playoffs by a game. And, the team was upset. The fans were upset. It did not work out, at least initially, as they had hoped. So they are not going to repeat that. Even if they're not in first, I'm led to believe they're not going to be a seller again. They're going to be a buyer if there are opportunities for them to buy. And I get it. They're reacting certainly to what happened last year. They're a very smart front office. They, tried to make a deal that was interesting to trade their closer.
Right,
and I think they were going to I think they thought they might have some more things lined up. I know that Brian Reynolds was a guy that they were targeting at the time, and those other things didn't come to fruition. So they didn't quite have their ducks in a row there. And the result was, a lot of times with trades, there'll be fan backlash, but in this case, there was clubhouse backlash, and certainly the other players weren't happy about it. And kind of showed on the field that first week. They were kind of depressed, and they played like it. So they're not going to repeat that. Probably not a surprise, but they have obviously excellent players that they could trade that now will not be traded. Corbin Burns being the most prominent one, starting.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up to you, John. Is Corbin Burns is who you mentioned in your column this week about he's that guy that they look like they probably won't be trading him, right?
I'm told they're not going to be a seller. Of course, we're a long way from the deadline. And if they lose an enormous number of games, I guess things can change. But certainly that is not their mindset. It's not their mindset if they're in first, if they're close. I think we thought going in that St. Louis was probably the best team, and then Milwaukee was probably the second best team. Milwaukee's had a ton of injuries, yet they have outplayed St. Louis and everybody else. So they're going to stay with it, and I believe they are.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting too, John, is that, as you say that they're not going to be sellers, they are playing good baseball. And a guy like Corbin Burns is interesting too, considering the fact with his contract history and how the negotiations gone with Milwaukee. But you say they look like they're going to hold on to him, which is, I guess, good news for Milwaukee there. Let's go to our next topic here. Let's talk about the American League versus the National League. A very interesting dynamic when you look at both of these leagues. How competitive and how much better the American League is currently as it stands than the National League. What more can you say about the AL compared to the NL and the amount of teams that look like they're actual contenders?
Yeah, a lot of surprises early this year. One of the surprises is that the American League is outplaying the National League by quite a bit. We always looked at the All-Star game as kind of a fluke that the American League has won 16 out of the last 19 All-Star games. Probably shouldn't have looked at it that way. I'm not an analytics expert, but 16 out of 19 probably isn't luck. And the American League is probably just a little bit better. I don't think they're that much better, but it is odd that all 5 teams in the American League East have winning records. 4 out of 5 teams in the American League West have winning records. If you look at the surprising, I wouldn't say bad teams, but the teams that have underperformed this year, the Padres, the Phillies, the Cardinals, you could probably even put the Mets in that category, though they're playing much better at this moment, having just played the Phillies, who they keep beating up on. At this point, I think that kind of balanced schedule has really aided the American League teams. And, in the National League right now, we have a team, the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are 1 game over, who'd be the wild card team. This is something that MLB wanted to avoid. We'll see. We're only a little more than 1/3 of the way through the season. Somebody will probably separate themselves, whether it be San Francisco, maybe Pittsburgh even. St. Louis could come up. And I don't think we're going to have a team that's 1 or 2 games over 500 in the playoffs. But right now, that's the way it stands.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you say that the Pittsburgh Pirates, like a lot of people didn't think of them as a possible playoff team. And they are playing good baseball right now, and they're hanging in there right now. John, let's bring this all home and talk about your disappointing team of the week. Who is it?
Well, it's got to be the Phillies. I just went and saw the Phillies against the Mets, and the Phillies got swept out, and they're now 25-31. This is a team that was in the World Series last year, as we know. I'm not breaking any new ground there. Signed Trey Turner for $300 million. Now, he has not performed like Trey Turner. The whole team has not performed as expected. They've obviously had some injuries. Certainly, Ranger Suarez did not start with the team. You had Rhys Hoskins, who's out for the year. Bryce Harper did not start with the team, but you know what? Every team has had injuries. They have really underperformed. And, being in that club, I've been in a lot of sad clubhouses. That was an all-time sad one yesterday after they lost to the Mets 4-2. And look, Max Scherzer is certainly pitching like Max Scherzer again. And he's been a Philly killer forever from his days with the Nats, and it continued. But they're now 25 and 31, and they realize that they've got to get moving. I talked to a few guys in that clubhouse, but Nick Castellanos was really good and really laid it on the line. And what he said was, the quote was, "We can't go about it that baseball owes us something because we had a magical run last year. Whatever fire we have as a group, I think it's about time it shows." So, I mean, that pretty much says it all. They need to get moving and fast.
Yeah, they had currently sitting at 25 and 31 coming into Friday with a minus 45 run differential, 3-7 in their last 10. You talk about that possible World Series hangover. Guys like Trey Turner aren't performing up to their contract right now. Obviously, they just got Bryce Harper back from Tommy John surgery. He's trying to work his way back as a full-time player. And Kyle Schwarber is batting in 160s right now. So, I mean, there's that lineup just isn't producing what they need right now, John.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder, the WBC guys really have not done it. I mean, I think it's just coincidence. It's a small sample size. There weren't that many guys on that WBC team. Obviously, it was like an all-star lineup, and the Phillies had 1/3 of that all-star lineup, which you would think behooves well for them, because it was a great lineup. You mentioned Schwarber, obviously hitting well under 200. You've got JT Realmuto, who really hasn't shown much power this year, not doing as badly as Schwarber or Turner, but Turner, at last I checked, at an OPS plus in the 80s. I mean, this is a guy they, signed $300 million, and we thought that was a bargain because San Diego had offered $342 million. This should be an excellent team. Now, obviously, they've had some injuries, so, they're not going to be performing at optimal level, but to be this far below 500 at this stage, rather shocking.
It really is. And John, we thank you as always for going around the bases with us, man. Take it easy.
All right, Ryan, good talking to you.